So, I'll start off by talking about the north spawn for this map, Malinovka. What I usually do in a medium tank is go up to this area here at C5. And I feel that this is probably the most important spot on the map for a medium tank to go, especially in the early game, because what it can do is you can get shots on people that are crossing here. And that's if a scout on your team goes along here, which usually you'll have someone that goes that way. Especially in high tiers with people that know what they're doing. So have people that will go, along this area of the swamp that will be able to spot people in the early game as they're crossing. Not when they get into these bushes though. So you want to make it to this area from the north spawn very quickly because you have a short window of time to be able to get shots on the people down here. You can also spot people as they move out into the town, but this doesn't really happen in pub matches. I don't know about clan wars or anything else, but it doesn't seem to happen at all, except in maybe tier 1 and 2 where no one has any clue what they're doing. But you can spot people if they go to this area, but don't expect anything to happen because not many people are that stupid, honestly. And if someone does spot for your team, as you can get shots on the people that are enemies from the south spawn going up this hill here, but not when they're up on the hill because there are ledges and rocks and things that get in the way. So unless they're very stupid and expose themselves to fire, then you're not going to get any shots. But, it is World of Tanks, so there are a fair share of people who don't really know what they're doing, and you can get some shots on them. But again, don't count on it. This position is also important because it will block anyone being able to advance along this area, which I don't really see anymore, but it used to be fairly common for people to cross this area, especially from the southern spawn. Not as much from the northern spawn because it doesn't really give them a huge advantage to take this area early in the game. But from the southern spawn, definitely, because they will be able to spot people camping here, people camping here, people camping the base even, and there is enough of a lip that will provide cover to return fire from your team at the base. So take this area, get in the bushes here, spot people in the early game, and you should be good. One thing that's great about this area is that the bushes are flat, or they're on flat ground rather than very sloped ground. So you can back up 15 meters behind the bush will appear solid. You can shoot through it, and the camo on the bush will not be made invisible. It won't be reduced, but your tank's camo will be. But that means that the effect is that you're not as visible to the enemy team as you would be if you had just been in the bush and fired, because doing that makes every bush in a 15-meter radius effectively not a bush. It doesn't give you any camo bonus or anything. One area that people used to like to push is along here, but I don't see that happening anywhere near as much. I know when Wargaming did the map changes, they kind of added a low ground, along here that would, help facilitate a push. But for some reason, people don't really do it as much anymore. I think probably a big reason for why it used to happen so much is that it used to catch people off guard, and it was a viable tactic mostly because of that point, is that you'd catch people off guard and they wouldn't be expecting it. But over time, as it became more and more common, people would get wise to that, and they wouldn't just sit here. Well, people do sit here, obviously. It's Malinovka. There's always people camping the base, but they're at least aware that people from the enemy team may be here or here. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend going along this line at all, especially if you are alone I would not do that at all. Maybe in a platoon of medium tanks, maybe if like 5 of your team goes that way. But then again, like if 5 of your team goes that way, it might be better just to go here and then wait for this flank to fall, and then, you know, shoot attackers as they come down the hill, and delay them while your team can go this way. Because 4 tanks going this way probably would be enough to push, but I would say those 4 tanks would be much better used here, up on the hill, maybe along this area. But again, I don't recommend pushing this way, pushing right through the middle, unless it's the right time, really. Alright, so for the south spawn, what you're going to usually want to do is go this way and up to this little mound here, which is sort of the same idea as here, but it's definitely not as strong of a position as this area. So this has bushes here, here, and here, and that will let you be shielded, and mounds too, be shielded from fire from the hill, and the mounds here will also protect you from people shooting over here as well as here. Whereas this position here, you can only really use it as cover from people here and here, or you can use it as cover from the hill, but it exposes you to people here and here, as the hill isn't very, it's not big enough, and there's not a depression behind it that will keep you in enough cover. And as again, it's really only good for early game, to get shots on people, and while they're maybe shots on people up on the hill too. But there will come a time when, if your team takes the hill, you're going to want to move up, and you're probably going to want to go here to this area where there's a row of trees, and you can't see it, but there's a pretty prominent ridge here that provides great cover from anyone, you know, over here on this whole side of the map. And you can go hull down here, even if you don't have very good gun depression, because there's sort of a T that's made with the ridges here, and driving your tank up parallel to the ridge that you want to poke, and getting your front tracks up on the T ridge will let you raise your turret up just enough to shoot over and still have gun depression, while hiding your hull. And you don't need to have great gun depression to be able to do that. You can do that in T62A that has 5 degrees of gun depression, things like that. It's totally easy to just abuse the terrain to your advantage. If your team doesn't take the hill, this position isn't very strong, to be honest. It does provide cover, but not from anyone on the hill. You probably want to fall back to the base, get into some low area here, maybe go into the forest here, but that kind of cuts off of your retreat. So if you didn't want to stay here, you'd have to cross the open to get back to your base. So I don't really recommend going here, but you could. If there's a lot of teammates up here that are defending against enemies that have taken the hill and coming down, then you may want to use this mound here and the bushes to shoot through them without being spotted. And as always, if you're 15 meters behind the bush, you can shoot through it. If you're not, then the bush will not give you any camo bonus for, I believe it's 5 seconds after you fire. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Other things, I would not recommend crossing here at all. Oh yes, once you take this mid area and use your gun depression to shoot people on the northern team, you know, around this area, make sure that you get all of them before you push up, because if you get caught out in this open field, you're going to be dead pretty quickly. But once you do that, I would definitely recommend coming down and going into this low area here. and using these bushes and the hill to spot anyone left that is back in the base. And that's pretty much how you play Malinovka. Alright, so places that I like to avoid on this map would be the hill, which is not a bad place to go, especially if you're in a heavy tank. The hill is definitely a good place to go. But what it does is it takes some of the skill out of an engagement. Well, when I say skill, it really gives your enemies a chance to put a shot into you for every shot you put into them. And it's much harder to do lots of damage without taking a ton in return. It's much more risky. I think risk and reward is definitely a big part of this. If I did have to go to hill, I would probably take the upper route rather than this one, because I think you can't get shot from the lower areas as much if you're on the upper hill, but I may be wrong. I'm not too sure about that, but that's what I think I remember, is that the upper pass is more safe. Now, definitely I like to avoid crossing here because it's very risky. It may, work once every 5 games or maybe even less than that, but it's very risky, and most of the time it just means writing off your tank. I would also avoid going this way. I know it used to be something that people did a lot, but I never see it happen as much anymore, and it's not so new that people are they know how to deal with it, especially the kind of people that camp bases all the time, because they've done it more than once. I would also avoid going this way, just because every once in a while you may get caught out in the open and shot by people here, or if you're from the south spawn and you're crossing up, you may get shot by people here, 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 here. You can basically be shot by almost anyone on the map, apart from up here because they're out of draw distance. I think the draw distance is like kind of, I would like to say, yeah, that's probably about the draw distance range. But I know that you can get shots from this mid-ridge. You can be seen. You can't actually get shots because there's a ridge here. You can be seen on screen by people around here, that area. So yeah, I would say that, along these lines is where the draw distance cuts off if you were to go this way. So I wouldn't recommend going hill in a medium tank, although it's probably the best option if you don't want to sit here or here. This is probably the second best option or alternative that you have, which it's not the best way to play, but it can work in a pinch, maybe like 50% of the time. It's just not very consistent, and sometimes you may do lots of damage, sometimes you may get caught out and do 0 damage. It's just that kind of risk that you take by going this way. This way I don't feel is very consistent at all. It doesn't work anywhere near enough. In a medium tank, especially in the early game, you'll just get obliterated. Maybe in the late game it becomes much more viable, as does here too. In the late game these areas will get better, and definitely don't go this way. This road is just asking to be killed. And don't go along here ever at all.